Good morning. Welcome to Christ Church Live. I'm your host, Father Michael, interim at Christ Church. And today I have the great privilege to interview Julie Young and Matt Rich, co-chairs of the call committee at Christ Church. I know a lot of you probably have some questions, soul-searching questions, questions that you've been wanting to ask for quite some time and haven't had the opportunity. So today is your opportunity. You can leave some comments or questions in the comments section, and Matt and Julie can answer your questions. This video will air live on YouTube on Wednesday at 3. So please invite everyone to join with us, and we'll have a wonderful time together learning about what's going on with the call committee. Julie, Matt, it's certainly great to have you with us today. I know it's a very, very busy time for you and members of your committee as you engage with possible candidates and try to discern God's good and perfect will for Christ Church. It's not always easy to discern God's good and perfect will, but you have so many wonderful members on your committee, and you two are such able leaders. I know it's been a good process for you. I've had several people tell me they've enjoyed, learned a lot about being on the committee, enjoyed your leadership, and so all of these dynamics certainly come into play. So I'm very grateful that you're with us today, and we're going to ask you some questions. So feel free to shoot straight from the hip and let our folks know what's going on. Matt, it's good to see you today, as well as Julie. Please tell our viewers what this process, this search process, has been like, and sort of your timeline going forward. I know a lot of people are anxious to hear an update from your committee. So could you just kind of highlight what's really going on right now?
Absolutely, and thank you so much for having us. I'm really excited to be here, and hopefully can answer some questions. And we really want to keep this community. We really want to communicate and stay open with the parish. So thank you very much for having us today. And may I just say, I agree with you a moment ago. We do have outstanding members of the call committee. I've been really impressed with every single one. Julie's been fantastic. I couldn't ask for a better co-chair. She's been wonderful. So yeah, I think it's been a really great process.
Yeah.
As you said, it is very busy. It's a lot of work. Julie and I were saying today, it feels like we took on a second job, at least a part-time job. But anyway, we're happy to do it and glad to do it. So in terms of our process, it is approximately a year-long process that we started late last fall, and we're still hoping to keep to roughly that time schedule. I'll get more into some of the details, I think later on, some of our questions. But what we've done so far is we began with the listening sessions and a survey, and we got those back. We interpreted those results and developed a parish profile, and basically what's called the OTM. It's essentially a job description that's posted throughout the Episcopal Church. And that started, and then last month, maybe it was a month before now, but at least last month we started receiving applications, as we say, from candidates who are interested. And so we have candidates who are interested, and we've been receiving those. And actually, the deadline for starting that process is June 30th. So we still have another week or 10 days or whatever it is to accept basically applications. So what we do then, the process is we review those, we discern those as a committee. We review all the materials they've sent us. We sent each person a set of questions, and we ask for written responses. And so those go beyond the questions that are in the Office of Transmission Ministry, the OTM profile. So we have the answers to those questions. So it's a lot to read. It's a lot of material to read for every candidate. And most of us are going deeper and clicking on links to sermons and looking at home parishes and seeing how they are. And from then we discern who do we want to move forward with. And then once we move forward with these folks, then there are some that they've all been outstanding candidates. Everyone has been highly qualified, and we've been really been very pleased. But some I think we can realize right off the bat just aren't quite what's right for this particular parish. But then the folks that we move on with, we're conducting video interviews, and we have begun those video interviews. We've started those. We hope to have those wrapped up in the beginning, middle of, or late July. It depends on the candidates. If we get another candidate on June 30th, for instance, that may extend things a little bit. But we'll be performing those. Actually, we had one at 8 o'clock Saturday morning, which was, and everybody showed up. It was great. So we're working those into our schedule, and we hope to wrap those up by the end of July. And at that point, we'll discern, and I think Julie will talk a little bit more about this, but we would visit these candidates in their home parish and in their home. Based on the COVID-19 and the travel restrictions, we may not be able to do that. We may conduct another round of video interviews. We haven't quite decided yet, and it's a little ways off, so we want to see what the latest guidance is at that point. And then after that, we would invite a very small number, 2, 3, possibly 4 finalists to actually come visit us in Coronado. And that part of things, we still don't know how it's all going to work out. That's a little farther in the future, and we really do hope to meet everybody in person. And that's kind of where that's definitely our goal. Before we make a recommendation to the vestry, but again, we do have to play that a little bit by ear and see how things go to get folks out here. So that should happen, assuming we can get our candidates here, or at least our top couple candidates here to Coronado. Then we will meet with them in person. They'll meet not only with the calling committee, but the vestry. And then finally, we'll discern and make a recommendation to the vestry. Our intention is to make a single recommendation to the vestry. It's potentially we could make a recommendation of 2 folks, but that's not our goal. Our goal is to recommend 1. And we hope to have that complete, ideally in August. And here I'm getting a little optimistic, and Julie can reinforce this. I'm getting a little optimistic here, but if we could do that by August or early September, the vestry can decide to go ahead and call that candidate. If finalize some of the various negotiations and terms and stuff like that, and then ideally, and our goal has always been to have a new rector here in time for Advent of this year of 2020. Again, that's a bit optimistic. We've been a little delayed here and there, and we still have some more delays coming with the travel restrictions and meeting in person. So that's optimistic, and realistically, it may take until the beginning of next year. But again, that we're still setting our goal, and until we know for sure we're not going to make it, we're still going to keep trying to do so. So that's an outline of our timeline. Of course, there's a lot of details and intermediate steps along the way. We're meeting actually more than once a week now, if you look at Zoom interviews and other reasons to meet. So we're meeting very frequently now, and they're long meetings. There's a lot to cover and a lot to get done. We still have a long way to go. So yeah. Does that answer your question?
No, that's great, Matt. Thanks. I mean, I know from my own experience, having been a candidate, it's a long process for both the candidate and the committee, because there's questions, narratives, histories, OTM profiles. And so I really appreciate that. It's a great update there. And thanks. We have more questions. Julie, it's good to be with you today, and certainly realize that all your hard work and due diligence just happened to coincide with the outbreak of COVID-19. So as we do these weekly interviews, we're asking everyone, how has this pandemic altered or changed or affected the way the committee works and your goals and hopes and dreams for the committee?
Thank you. And thanks for having us and helping us communicate not only with you, but with the parish during this very unusual time. We were very fortunate to have started the process before the pandemic hit.
Right.
The things that really needed to be done in person were done. We did the listening sessions and a couple of adult forums. Then everything shut down, and we did have to postpone or cancel a meeting that was scheduled for March 15th, but it took us a couple weeks to start meeting on Zoom. But we have been very busy since then. During the period where we were just kind of trying to figure out how to move forward, we were not doing nothing. We were fine-tuning our portfolio and our profile and updating them to reflect the current situation that we find ourselves in. We did postpone the job opening. We felt we had hoped to do it by March 30th, but felt that it was more appropriate to post Easter week. Thought theologically that seemed reasonable and warranted. And then, as Matt said, we extended our deadline. We had intended to have it, the job offerings closed by the end of May, but we extended it through June in recognition that every candidate that we're looking at is going through the same thing we are.
Mm-hmm.
We have hit our stride, as Matt said. We're meeting on Zoom. We're doing Zoom interviews, which we would have been doing at this point anyway,
Right.
because these candidates are, all over the country. And the silver lining is that all of our committee members have made every single meeting since we started meeting by Zoom.
That's wonderful.
People join us from Montana, from Richmond, from Tahoe, but everybody's there.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
It's hard to get everybody there. So I know it's hard enough when you're meeting in person.
Right. Well, we never had 100% attendance when we met in person. And since this has happened, we've had probably 8 meetings, and including interviews, and everybody has been to every single one.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's wonderful. You don't normally see that. So yeah, you're talking about COVID. I mean, and it was the same for the candidates, which it was. I was trying to think from a candidate's perspective. It would even be very difficult to be thinking about moving at a time like that, because your parish looks at you as the spiritual leader, and they typically have no idea you're entertaining moving on to another parish, or that God's calling you to a different ministry. So yeah, I think it's sometimes can be a catch-22, but you all have handled it very well. So my commendations to you and your committee.
Right. We did have a really heartfelt discussion about whether we wanted to move forward, and we talked it over with the senior warden and with the canon to the ordinary, and they both encouraged us to stay on track.
Mm. And
we have found that, the candidates, for a variety of reasons, they're available. So
mm-hmm. Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, good job. Good on you and your committee. I don't think I've ever heard of a committee having 100% by Zoom. I miss a lot of Zoom meetings myself. Sometimes feel zoomed out, actually, but
yeah,
nice. Mm-hmm. That's really nice. Matt, I know we've touched a little bit on this question of updating the parish in multiple ways. You mentioned the job description, and not everybody's real familiar with that job description that goes on the National Church's site, the OTM, the Office of Transition Ministry. I read your parish profile, and it was really awesome. So I would venture to say that you've gleaned a lot of candidates just based on your parish profile. You want to highlight anything about the parish profile that really stands out for you?
Well, the profile, I thought, we had a profile subcommittee. So out of the call committee, we had a few folks that volunteered, and they did an outstanding job. They worked probably as more than the rest of us worked all the way up until that point, and really went above and beyond to make sure that profile really reflected what we learned in the listening sessions and the and from the survey. And so we all read that profile and reviewed it, and we're very careful about it. Had a couple meetings based on it. And so, I thought that profile really was a good representation of our parish. And you're right that candidates have looked at that and have said that they were impressed with it. Julie, do you want to add anything about the profile itself?
No, I would encourage people to look at it. Mm-hmm. It's on our website. The subcommittee that did it did an amazing job. And it will make you proud of being a member of Christ Church to read it.
Absolutely. Yeah. The listening sessions were wonderfully done. And a lot of what you put in the parish profile is a result of all that hard work of the listening sessions and other dynamics as well. So yeah, there's just so many moving parts to your committee. It's really can give you a lot of headaches. There's just a lot of dynamics that come into play. And Julie, this next question, we've kind of talked a little bit about this, but my experience serving as an interim and also as a candidate, preparing to be called as a rector to a position, churches seem to be interested in seemingly the same things. The ability to preach the good news, pastoral care is important. And here's one that's I've never not seen in a profile: the ability to raise money, stewardship, good stewardship practices. What were some of the overarching concerns of your committee members as you discussed these possible traits of your next rector?
Well, we tried to reflect what we heard at the listening sessions in the survey, in putting together the profile and in crafting what our concerns would be and how we would frame our questions. So in the OTM profile, there is one question, and they only allow you to put 8 words in the answer, and it is to describe the gifts and traits of a rector. 8 words or less. So the words we used were compassionate caregiver, engaging preacher, collaborative leader, and approachable personality. Beyond that, we wanted to be sure that the candidates would address the 3 priorities that were identified in the listening section. Some of these are not surprising either. Attracting young families, reaching new people, and also incorporating them into the church. And then this one is a little unique to Christ Church, according to our canon to the ordinary, creating more opportunities for people to form meaningful relations. In addition to that, we're hoping to find a priest that has some school experience, since Christ Church and Christ Day School are part of the same organization and important to each other. And lastly, we want to have priests that is sensitive to the various subcultures of our congregation, including seasonal members and the military, and a significant retired population.
Right. Yeah, that's very interesting. And that makes sense because of the demographic of Coronado, of course.
Right.
Yeah, certainly military, the school, you bring up a good point with the school. And I think that's very intriguing that you've included that question about the interaction with the school, a priest that understands, continuing education, or not continuing education, but the education dynamic of a school through 6 grades. And, I went to a church as the candidate, the final candidate. They had a school, and, I had very little experience with the school. And that was an eye-opener for me. I mean, it was an on-the-job learning experience. Lots of headaches, lots of controversy, money issues. And had I had that knowledge, or had they asked me that in an interview question beforehand, it would have really helped me to be, on top of that. I mean, I was young and naive and didn't really pay much attention to that question that wasn't there, reading between the lines. But your committee has incorporated that, and it's really good that you have, because the school is experiencing the same dynamics that schools across the country are experiencing: financial difficulties, distance learning, trying to incorporate all those things that are important. And that was one of the questions I noticed that one of the candidates had asked: what's the interaction between the school and the church? And basically, we have a wonderful interaction and relationship, vice versa, with the school and the church. And it's one entity, and the school is just part of the outreach of the overall church's ministry. So, yeah, thank you for including that question. I say that for other candidates because I didn't get that luxury when I was interviewing once. So thank you.
Let me add in there,
Sure.
some of the things that the church was most interested in. The call committee used to ask what they were most interested in. You said the example of the ability to preach, right? Well, that's something that we think everybody thinks is important. A great sermon, everybody thinks a great sermon is a very important thing, or most people do think that it's near the top of the priority. But the problem is, if you ask each 14 members of the call committee what a great sermon is, you're going to get 14 different answers. And I think that's been a real strength for us. And so we really see, again, we have the same overall goals here, but we have a lot of different ideas on how to reach that. And I think that's been really good, and really represents the congregation as a whole. Right. I've been really proud to see that. And we have, on any given candidate, we have people who like some things and don't like others, and sometimes it overlaps, and sometimes two different people may agree entirely on one person but not on another, which has been really good, because we're one of my personal concerns, and I think some of the committee members share that, is that where I may have the ideal candidate in mind, I may have a picture of the ideal rector. One, I'm probably wrong, but two, even if that rector really was the ideal one for me, it may not be for the entire church.
Right.
And so we have to look at it from both sides. We have to use our own understanding of things and our own evaluation, but we have to look at that as how that's going to affect the church. And of course, we really have to have a lot of faith in the Holy Spirit that's going to guide us to the right end.
Yeah, that's a great point, Matt, because you're in this together, and as you said, 2 or 3 members may have, hey, this is the ideal candidate. Unless it's a consensus, it creates all kinds of problems too. So you have to be willing to bend and flex a lot and see their point of view that may disagree with your ideal candidate. So yeah, it's a give and take process for sure. And it's hard. It's not easy. But yeah, thanks. That's a wonderful point. I know you've had a great history of clergy at Christ Church, just from what I remember, with Edward, Harrison and Ann Bridgers, and even before that. So you have a wonderful history. And I think that history is something that would drive candidates too, based on your mission and vision for Christ Church in the future. So as you look at that holistic process, sometimes it's easy to get tunnel visioned, and look at candidates from one perspective. I love what you said about preaching. The things that I always remember from my interviews, preaching, they would ask for a video or a tape of a sermon. They wanted to know how you would build a church with a great youth ministry. That was significant. And certainly, our church is struggling financially. How are you going to bail us out of this financial? And those are hard questions and hard realities for every church. So you have to look hard. You have to read between the lines of the profile or the narrative questions, because I can guarantee you, Julie and Matt, speaking as a priest, everybody wants to put their best foot forward. They're trying to capture your attention with their gifts and graces, which they should, but you have to be able to discern that in the interview process. It's kind of like the military. We had to walk on water like Jesus to get promoted. We had to write all these wonderful things about ourselves, and that's what these candidates are doing too. But that's what you want, and you want this holistic committee to kind of structure a way forward to find the ideal candidate, but not just the ideal candidate, the candidate that you as a group feel that God is leading you to call. And that's the most overarching issue that you face. I know you, Julie, you and Matt, you work with the vestry. You were commissioned by the vestry. How do you interact, Julie, with the vestry? And Matt, you can jump in here too. What's your interaction with the vestry at this point?
Well, because they have charged us with finding, the call process, and because the call process is confidential, we have had limited interaction with the vestry as a whole since the beginning. At the very beginning, we had a joint vestry call committee day-long retreat with the canon to the ordinary, laying out the process. And then we had a listening session with the vestry to get what they thought was important. But since then, I've had occasional talks with our senior warden. The main way we interact with the vestry is through our vestry liaison. And she is charged with communicating the non-confidential aspects of our call process with the vestry.
Yeah, so you have a liaison, I know.
We do,
yes.
Yeah,
on the vestry, serving as a member of the vestry as well. Yeah, that's really a good way to do it, because the confidentiality issue is so important. Because if somebody released a name and of course, those candidates, their churches don't know they're seeking, another position. So
Right.
it can create all kinds of dynamics. Matt, anything that you think of in that arena?
Well, regarding confidentiality, yes, I mean we've stressed that very much. We can't just mention anything whatsoever about the candidates that we're talking about, and that includes the number of candidates that we have. I'll go so far into say that it's plural, but beyond that, I can't talk about any
Right.
specific numbers.
Yeah.
And even though I mentioned a couple numbers in terms of finalists and so on, again, those are vague. We don't know that yet, and so the confidentiality is very, very important
Mhm.
for a number of reasons. In fact, we're not even contacting references until later in the process because we want to make sure that it's really kind of our top finalists. Because even the references, it may be somewhat confidential there as well.
Yeah.
So that is tricky, and it's really hard. We want to talk about things, but we can't talk about where the candidates are from
Right.
or what their current position is, whether it's a big church, small church, or some other position in the church. We can't talk about any of that.
Mhm.
And so, which makes it really difficult. I mean, we could talk among ourselves here, but we get a lot of questions, but anyway, I think so far we've been managing. Everybody's fully committed to the confidentiality, and I haven't seen any problems with it at all.
No, that's good. I was trying to think back on my experience with the bishop search and being a candidate there. When we started that process, they didn't want to know if you were male or female, where you lived. Is that something that you all have incorporated as well, or no? You know the candidates are gender or?
Yes, the resumes and in part of the OTM response, there are a lot of those questions. It talks about marital status and so on, and of course the Zoom interviews. We don't want to read too much into the face value, but again, that gives us a lot of information as far as that goes. No, we haven't tried to keep it as blind as that at this point.
Yeah, I'd never heard of that actually before, so it caught me off guard in my experience. I've never been a part of that process in that fashion anyway.
Maybe that's unique to a bishop search.
I think so. Yeah, it was quite different because the three candidates were all taken aback by that, but it was really interesting to try to draft your responses, which would be similar questions that you're asking these candidates without alluding to the fact that I'm married, I have three kids, I'm same-sex partner, and whatever, so that was very interesting. Let me ask you this question, Julie, and it's not there, but I think you can answer it anyway. As you think about diversity in Christ Church, you and Matt, what are some of the things that come to mind about diversity in the role of the rector?
Oh boy. So we would like, I would like, I'll speak only for myself, a rector who cherishes diversity of all types. And we live in a border area, and we have a number of Latinx in Coronado that we are not reaching currently. I would love to see a rector that's able to reach all groups within Coronado and the broader area. We have, and I don't know if diversity, in your mind, diversity would encompass what's going on currently in the world with racial reconciliation.
Right.
We are asking a question of the candidates that are doing the Zoom interviews about their experience with anti-racism training and racial reconciliation and justice.
That's awesome. Yeah. And that's certainly, as we know, very prevalent in what's going on. And I didn't mean to catch you off guard, but sometimes I like to throw a question out there that's certainly surrounding the issues of the day. And no more issues surround the issues of the day better than COVID-19 and the civil unrest in our nation, which has been coming to a boiling point for a long time. Matt, any thoughts on that from your perspective?
Well, I'd like to add that, I mean, there's different kinds of diversity. And in fact, the word diversity is getting to be a little bit of a loaded word. On the committee, we have a really, really wide diversity of thoughts and philosophy and understanding of theology and backgrounds within the church and from different churches. We have people who are new to church in general, came to the Episcopal Church from another church, lifelong Episcopalians.
Mhm.
And again, as I see, there's a huge diversity on what these ideal things are. Like I mentioned, preaching. Everybody's got a different idea what a great sermon is, even though we all agree that a great sermon is important. So, I don't want to trip up on the word diversity. I think we have a great diversity of ideas, and we are all certainly concerned about the issues of the day and keeping that in mind. And we do talk to our candidates to see how they respond, about that question. I think we've seen heard some very interesting answers,
Mhm.
new and original takes as well as other things that we might more or less expect and so on.
Yeah, that's great. I was thinking back to a church that I was an interim at, and they were very high Anglo-Catholic parish, did not really care for women in ministry or would not want a female rector, which caught me off guard as an Episcopalian. And the church is so diverse and so welcoming. And one of the questions that came up on the search committee was maybe you should entertain the idea of calling a female rector to this church. Because what we learned in the military as a male military chaplain, we couldn't certainly meet the needs of a lot of the female troops, and so we had chaplains that were female that were commissioned to be chaplains, and so we learned a lot about our roles and responsibilities in that fashion. That's not the case at Christ Church. You've had a broad range of clergy, with Anne and Edward and beyond and before, so that's really wonderful. I commend Christ Church. When you say about preaching, that's a big issue for sure, but it gets kind of, convoluted sometimes because that shouldn't be the sole criteria of why we call someone. I mean, it should be important, and I haven't helped you much in that regard with my sermons at Christ Church, but you're on the right track anyway.
I'm just picking on that as an example.
It's really just been wonderful to have you, Matt and Julie. You're very gracious to be there. I love Christ Church. It's been one of my favorite assignments out of 7 now as an interim. The people are awesome, incredible, dynamic, loving, compassionate. They love the church. And I couldn't really think of 2 better co-chairs for the search committee as I look around. And I mean, there's many, many wonderfully gifted people, but you all have such great hearts to seek the best future for Christ Church, and you're doing that, and all of your committee members as well. I think as you go forward, I believe the Lord's going to certainly impress upon you the right candidate. I know that's how the Lord works. And it's just been a joy to be with you, not just in this interview, but at Christ Church since December. My time is sort of winding down based on your timeline, but I'll always consider this one of my favorite ministry opportunities ever. And it's because of people like you and members of that committee. Paul Laidline, I've never found a better senior warden in all my years of serving, and people who love the church and understand all the dynamics that church brings to it itself, we've discovered that in COVID, I mean, how many of us want to be in church worshiping together again? So, Matt,
when the time is right.
Yeah, it'll be good when the time is right. We're going to start our first service this next Sunday on the 28th at 9 o'clock for 36 people. So we'll see how that goes. It's not set in concrete. We're just trying to offer another extension of the ministry. But Matt, Julie, my thoughts and prayers as you continue this pilgrimage and this journey of faith. And I pray that God's blessings will be real in your life as you seek and discern his perfect will. I know you'll do that. Thank you for allowing me to ask you some hard questions. And I look forward to seeing you again in person sometime soon.
Thank you. And thank you very much. It was wonderful to have this opportunity.
Thank you, Father Tin. It was